The knock came after midnight in October 1922, when black-shirted squadristi dragged socialist mayors from their beds and forced liters of castor oil down their throats until their bodies convulsed in the streets. This was Benito Mussolini's calling card, a humiliation designed to break spirits before breaking bones, as Italy's former socialist journalist transformed himself into Il Duce and weaponized shame into a tool of absolute control. Within months, these midnight rituals would multiply across every Italian town, the beginning of a 20-year reign where neighbors disappeared to remote island prisons. Children were trained as miniature soldiers called Little Balilla, and the theatrical violence that built fascism would eventually consume its creator in front of a screaming mob at a Milan gas station. The black shirt at your door meant one thing: your life was about to be destroyed. The squadristi didn't need warrants or evidence. They arrived in gangs of 10 or 20, wearing black shirts like uniforms of terror, carrying clubs wrapped in barbed wire. Their weapon of choice wasn't bullets, it was humiliation. They forced liters of castor oil down victims' throats, a purgative so powerful it caused violent diarrhea for days. Men soiled themselves in public squares while crowds watched. Teachers, union leaders, journalists, anyone who questioned Mussolini, it didn't matter. Between 1920 and 1922, the squadristi launched over 3,000 attacks. They burned socialist newspapers, destroyed union halls, beat elected officials until bones shattered. The police did nothing. Sometimes they helped. This was psychological warfare designed to break spirits before bodies. Fear spread faster than violence itself. Families stopped speaking their opinions at dinner tables. Neighbors stopped trusting neighbors. Italy was learning to be silent. The mutilated victory. That's what Italians called their reward for winning the Great War. 600,000 dead soldiers, millions wounded, entire regions destroyed. For what? The Treaty of Versailles gave Italy scraps while Britain and France carved up empires. Veterans came home to find no jobs waiting, no pensions, no gratitude, just breadlines and broken promises. By 1920, inflation was devouring everything. The lira lost half its value in months. Factory workers went on strike. Peasants seized land from aristocrats. Socialist flags flew over city halls. The middle class watched in terror as Bolshevism spread across Europe. Russia had already fallen. Germany was teetering. Italy felt next. Into this chaos, Mussolini offered something seductive: order through strength, glory through violence, a return to Roman greatness. He promised to crush the socialists, restore discipline, make Italy feared again. Desperate people listened. Terrified people believed. The bluff that worked happened in October 1922, and it changed history. Mussolini called it the March on Rome, 30,000 blackshirts supposedly storming the capital to seize power. The reality was pathetic. Poorly armed men in soaked uniforms stumbled through rain, disorganized and freezing. The Italian army could have crushed them in hours. King Victor Emmanuel III had 12,000 trained soldiers in Rome alone. One order would have ended fascism before it truly began, but the king blinked. Terrified of civil war, pressured by industrialists who saw Mussolini as a weapon against socialism, he refused to sign the martial law decree. Instead, he invited Mussolini to form a government. Mussolini arrived by train, not marching, riding comfortably in a sleeping car, wearing a black shirt for the cameras. Democracy surrendered without a shot fired. The theatrical thug became prime minister because people in power believed they could control him. They were catastrophically wrong. "I take responsibility." Mussolini spoke those words in January 1925, and democracy died. He was confessing to murder. Socialist deputy Giacomo Matteotti had stood in parliament 6 months earlier, documenting fascist violence, demanding investigations. He listed names, dates, crimes. 10 days later, Matteotti was dragged into a car in the broad daylight on a Rome street. His body was found weeks later in a shallow grave, stabbed repeatedly. The killers were Mussolini's men. Evidence pointed directly to Il Duce. For months, Opposition parties demanded justice. The king wavered. Then, Mussolini gave his speech, not apologizing, threatening. He declared himself dictator, dared anyone to stop him. Nobody did. Within weeks, opposition newspapers were shut down. Opposition parties were banned. Secret police appeared. Thousands were arrested. The Aventine secession, politicians who had walked out in protest, were declared traitors. Italy became a one-party state because one man admitted to murder, and the system collapsed in fear. Everything within the state. Mussolini's slogan became Italy's prison. The Avra secret police infiltrated every aspect of life. Neighbors informed on neighbors for a joke about Il Duce. Teachers reported students whose parents seemed insufficiently enthusiastic. Mail was opened. Phone calls were monitored. Dissenters didn't go to jail. They vanished to confino, internal exile on remote islands where malaria and isolation broke them slowly. Thousands rotted on Lipari, Ponza, Ventotene. But the regime's most insidious work targeted children. Boys joined the Opera Nazionale Ballia at age 6, marching in miniature uniforms, learning to worship Mussolini before they could read. Girls trained to become perfect fascist mothers, silent, obedient, endlessly pregnant. Textbooks were rewritten, math problems calculated artillery ranges. History glorified Roman conquest. By age 18, an entire generation knew only fascism. They couldn't remember freedom because they'd never experienced it. The state owned their minds completely. Empire of poison gas. That's what Mussolini built in Africa while the world looked away. In Libya, General Graziani herded entire populations into concentration camps. Over 100,000 Libyans died behind barbed wire, starved, diseased, worked to death. Survivors were forced to watch public hangings of resistance fighters. Then came Ethiopia. Mussolini wanted his Roman Empire, and he didn't care about international law. Italian planes dropped mustard gas on villages in 1935 and 1936. The gas burned through skin, blinded children, choked families in their homes. Soldiers used flamethrowers on hospitals marked with Red Cross symbols. They machine-gunned refugees. Priests were executed. Ancient monasteries were bombed. Estimates say 300,000 Ethiopians died. Mussolini personally ordered the gas attacks. His signatures are on the documents. He called Ethiopians subhuman, unworthy of mercy. This was genocide dressed as empire building, and Italy celebrated every victory. When friends became enemies happened overnight in 1938. Italian Jews had lived in Italy for over 2,000 years, longer than most Italians could trace their ancestry. They'd fought in the Great War. They'd joined the fascist party. Some were war heroes. None of it mattered. Mussolini, desperate to impress Hitler, copied Germany's Nuremberg laws. The Manifesto of Race declared Jews biologically inferior. Jewish children were expelled from schools mid-semester. Teachers who'd worked for decades lost their jobs instantly. Jewish doctors couldn't treat non-Jewish patients. Lawyers couldn't practice. Businesses were seized. Marriages between Jews and non-Jews became illegal. Families who'd been neighbors for generations suddenly couldn't speak to each other. Over 40,000 Italian Jews watched their lives dissolve. Then came deportations. Starting in 1943, Italian police rounded up Jews and shipped them to Auschwitz. Nearly 8,000 Italian Jews were murdered in Nazi death camps, betrayed by their own country. Piazzale Loreto, the same Milan square where Mussolini had displayed 15 executed partisans a year earlier, became his final stage on April 29, 1945. Partisans caught him fleeing toward Switzerland disguised in a German coat. They executed him and his mistress, Claretta Petacci, near Lake Como, then brought the bodies to Milan. What happened next was pure rage. Thousands gathered as the corpses were hung upside down from a gas station roof. People spat on them, kicked them, threw vegetables. Women who'd lost sons beat the bodies with sticks. Someone shot the corpse 5 times, once for each year of war. Il Duce, who'd built his power on spectacle and violence, ended as spectacle and violence. The man who promised to make Italy great had left it destroyed, occupied, starving. 23 years of fascism ended with a dictator swinging from a metal beam, unrecognizable and despised, a warning carved in flesh.